I was looking at this package of things that the federal government is going to introduce to make higher education, tertiary education, more accessible. They say that about 34% of us has a university degree. I don't have a university degree. Peter Clayton's behind the camera. Pete, do you have a...
No.
No, I don't have a... I had a secretary who had a BA once. And I'm sure she was brighter than me, but anyway, some people are suited to going to university, others are not. We all find our own way in our own time, I think. But there are some aspects. I was looking at this package of innovative, progressive steps forward suggested by the federal government over the weekend. My main concern, but I'll have some more to say about it tomorrow, my main concern is that, as I've got his wonderful speech over there somewhere, Abraham Lincoln said, you can't lift up the weak by tearing down the strong. It's all based on the premise that the bar is set too high. Perhaps the government should have a think about maybe why that bar to get into university and indeed stay in university is so high. It is, after all, a meritocracy. You want the brightest and the best. Doctors and lawyers and engineers and architects and everyone. Do you actually get a better society by lowering that standard? Perhaps if you've been to university and you've struggled and, you've taken the knocks and you've been, I won't say sent down, but, you've had to repeat a year or something, you may have a stronger opinion on it than I do, but I want to talk to you about it tomorrow. Philip Lowe had some interesting things to say during his overseas trip with Jim Chalmers, who's the treasurer, obviously. They both went off to this G20 meeting with all of the treasurers and heads of reserve banks everywhere. Jim standing right next to him. That is Philip Lowe, delivered an excellent speech, pointing out Australia's need to increase productivity. Everything springs from productivity. He's perfectly right. Everything. It's wages growth, quality of life, security of employment, in fact. GDP, that is the gross wealth of the country, our place in the world. It all boils down to productivity. And he says, Philip Lowe, that should be the focus of our government. Now, I don't know what Jim Chalmers thought about that. I don't know if Philip Lowe had a sideways glance when he was saying all of this. Because you see, what Philip Lowe was saying makes a lot of sense, but it could be very difficult to introduce for this government to take it on, because the government is owned by the trade union movement. It has forever, since the get-go of the Labour Party. And the trade union movement motto is the least amount of work for the most amount of money over the shortest number of hours. Doesn't sound to me like a recipe for increasing productivity. Back in the old days, not so long ago, you might remember we had 12 faceless men who used to run the Labour Party. These were all the union bosses, the chiefs, the secretaries of the various unions. This whole thing was exposed by a great journalist by the name of Laurie Oakes. There were some startling pictures of the leaders of the Labour Party sitting outside on little chairs waiting for the 12 faceless men to call them in. The 12 faceless men, the most powerful people in the trade union movement. No women, by the way, just men. They would meet, bring the leaders and the deputy leaders in to the room, and then give them their riding instructions. Perfectly true. These unelected people ran the show, therefore ran the country. These days it is a little more subtle, but nevertheless the same spirit, which I believe is deeply ingrained in the DNA of the ALP. So Philip, good luck with that. Good luck with your campaign to increase productivity. And of course I wish you well with your future as well. I think that'll be very bright, by the way. Here's another thought. What the modern digital streaming age has done to the movies and television, and this is what the entire industry has gone out on strike over in the United States. What streaming has done to the movie and television business is it has also done to the recording industry. What was basically a meritocracy, you know, if you had a #1 hit record and you sold 1 million copies, that was gold. You got a gold record. Or your record sold more, it went platinum. You got a platinum record. You were making money. Now, with a hit record, you are making a fraction of 1 cent every time somebody downloads your record. I don't know how we allowed this to happen. Now, Pete, you're a musician.
Yes.
How do you feel about, do you ever get a royalty check?
No.
Oh, it's amazing, isn't it?
Streams around the world, but
Yeah.
it's 1/10 of 1 cent.
1/10 of 1 cent you get every time somebody listens to one of your tracks.
So I get a few dollars. I mean, a few dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. No wonder they're on strike. I don't know where that's going to lead, but I sort of sense a wave of change in the world. We can't just sort of dig our heels in and say we're going on strike because we don't like the way things have gone. The world is changing. We must be able to adapt. You know, the only creature, really big creature, I suppose like Hollywood, the really big creature that didn't think it had to adapt was the dinosaur. And he didn't make it. I see they have amended the LGBTIQ agenda. That's not a gender. Not a, I mean, anyway, I'm trying to be clever. They've introduced or they've added an A. So it's LGBTIQA. This is apparently for people who have no sexual attraction to anyone. They're asexual. Oh, I suppose that's probably where the A comes from, doesn't it? They're asexual. No sexual interest in anything. Well, I guess that could make sense. Why are we getting down into the minutiae where we have to divide people into all of these fractions of fractions of fractions and splinter groups, tiny minorities of sexuality? You could keep it going forever, of course. You've got LGBTIQA, so why not have, let me think, LGBTIQANIM? Which means simply, the NIM stands for not in the mood. You're interested, but not at the moment. You could keep it going forever, as I say. But we don't need labels. How about LGBTIQANIMB? The B's for boring. Boring, boring, boring. When is news not news? When is news not news? When I watch the news, because for years and years of doing talk programs, you do become a bit addicted to following what's going on in the world. Indeed, you count on it too. I mean, you can't go out there and cover everything. You depend on other people who are doing it for a living to do it for you. But there's so much PR and, I don't know what you'd call it, froth and bubble and things that certainly don't fit in my mind into the form of news. But the thing about news for TV and radio is it is expensive, yes. But it's an obligation, a responsibility. Yet when I flicked around, say on Saturday night, going back a bit to check out that Fatton by-election result, nothing. Not one commercial station bothered to have a newsroom or a journalist on hand to do its job, and that would be to inform us. I think that's pretty disgraceful. I know it's been going on for years. When I was reading evening news, even back in the 60s when I worked in Sydney, they used to record the updates and the late news. So you do your news bulletin at 6, and then before you left, you would record the updates and the late news. Now, it must have had something to do with overtime, I don't know, but it happens all over the country. They record the late news and then everybody goes home. Now, that's not news. And it really shouldn't be allowed by ACMA. ACMA's the cop on the broadcasting beat. If you've got a license to broadcast television or radio, I think the minimum responsibility should be that you broadcast the news, local news, 24/7. Even the ABC don't, you know. News radio on here in Adelaide, the old 1197 frequency, which used to be 5KA. Now, with a name like News Radio, you would think that they would set an example. They simply, midnight to dawn, for example, plug into BBC, the BBC overnight program, which of course over there is not overnight, but they just plug into the BBC. Locally, news breaks, I believe, are all recorded and automated. No one there, saving $1. Yet they will pay ridiculous prices for the rights to the cricket or the football or the tennis. They'll pay huge amounts of money for absolute crap, but they can't afford overtime to run a newsroom 24/7, which is exactly what radio and television stations should do as their minimum responsibility to the community. And how much would it cost them to put on a midnight to dawn program? A lot of radio stations choose to syndicate a midnight to dawn radio program. They forget that midnight to dawn programs are where most of the talent for the future of broadcasting is recruited and trained. That's where people learn the trade, cut their teeth, usually fresh out of the country, where they get a bit of experience in radio, and then they come back to the city, if they're lucky, and they get a break doing a midnight to dawn show, 1 or 2 or 3 a week. Now, I think it's essential for radio to keep their license. They must have a local midnight to dawn program. Why, for God's sake, not? Costs pretty much nothing and looks after the future of broadcasting. And listen, talking about the news, I was dismayed when I watched the news at night, and it doesn't really matter what channel you're watching. The first 20 or 30 minutes is taken up with crime and punishment. It's almost like the police rounds, law and order stuff, break-ins, car chases. What the hell are we turning our cities into, by the way? What are we turning our country into? News has got to be more than police files for the last 24 hours. It might be that it's easy content, maybe lazy journalism, but there's got to be other stuff happening in the world, our world. Yeah, it's easy, of course, to sit in a nice, comfortable chair and be critical, but I think, in a sense, that's my job here in the Court of Public Opinion to get people thinking. Maybe even the management of television and radio stations. Who knows? I was talking to you about the Matildas the other day. Great Australian sporting success story. There's no doubt about that. They're becoming a little militant. A little militant. They haven't actually gone out on strike, but they have gone out pretty publicly about money. The money that they're being paid. And quite public, making it an issue. They're not being paid as they would like to be paid. It's a bit of a worry. Well, it's not a good look for the general public. I do understand. But it should be pretty simple. Simple rule of thumb. If the women and the men playing tennis or football or swimming or anything you can think of, basketball, whatever, if you can pull the same crowd, the same number of viewers or listeners, you get the same money. You certainly should get the same money. But that's the key. It all comes down to the sponsors who are only interested in your popularity. It works in radio and television, every medium that I've ever heard of, the same way. If the people, the audience, are there to watch the women playing soccer, they deserve exactly the same money as the men playing the soccer. It's not their skill, not their performance, not their achievements, not their looks. If you can pull the crowd, you should get the same money, but not otherwise. Just time for one more, Pete? Then we'll do some dates?
Sure.
I've got nothing against people having stuff home delivered, but have you seen the ads for food that's delivered to the door, Pete?
Yes.
I find that fascinating. I can't imagine people not getting a deal of pleasure out of preparing, anticipating, participating, being involved in cooking, going into the kitchen, cooking dinner. It's not complicated. The supermarket or the corner store provide the ingredients. Now, apparently, the fashion is to have somebody bring your meal to you in a box. In a box. And leaving it at the front door. To me, I find that incredible. I can't believe something like that would actually take off and become popular. But it did. It did, and it has. Some birthdays, ladies and gentlemen. July 24, the first greetings telegram sent in Britain. 1851. Light and air for all, with no charge. Oh, I see. This was to tell people about the removal of the window tax in the United Kingdom. Have you heard about the window tax, Pete?
Only recently, yeah.
Well, it's interesting. If you go around Britain and you see the old houses with the windows all not boarded up but bricked up, there was a tax. They would come round and they would count the number of windows that you had in your home. And some of those big old homes had plenty of windows, but the people would brick up the windows so they didn't have windows. So the idea of somebody saying, they can't tax fresh air and sunlight, can they? Yes, they can. They used to tax you according to the number of windows you had on your house. And this was a telegram sent to people to tell them that it had been removed. 1851. Golly. 2019, the 10 millionth mini car. 10 million! Produced during the it was the 60s it started, but the car had its run for about 60 years. The anniversary year in Oxford, 2019. The 10 millionth mini. There was an innovative car. The trial of Dutch exotic dancer Mata Hari begins in Paris for allegedly spying for Germany and causing the deaths of 50,000 soldiers. 1917, Mata Hari, who worked, her very name worked itself into the language. Apollo 11, 1969, Apollo 11 returns to Earth safely. 1980, Peter Sellers, English actor and comedian. The Goon Show, Dr. Strangelove, the Pink Panther, dies at 54. Absolutely brilliant. I talked to him. I think I might have mentioned it to you once before. I talked to him only once. It was a very interesting interview. He agreed to do the interview, but he demanded that he do it in German. I firmly believe Peter Sellers was crazy, but extremely entertaining. Strange man, Peter Sellers. What else? Matthew Webb, English long-distance swimmer, who was the first man to swim unassisted across the English Channel, drowns in Niagara Falls in 1935. Don't be there. Matthew looking for trouble, I'm afraid. Mary Queen of Scots is forced to abdicate. Her one-year-old son becomes King James the V1. That's sixth, I think, isn't it, Pete? Yes. Of Scotland, 1567. Bindi Irwin, Australian TV personality, conservationist, daughter of Steve Irwin, born in Australia, in Budrum, in Australia, in 1998. Amelia Earhart, American aviator, first woman to fly solo around the Atlantic, born in Atchison, Kansas. They had a train service, didn't they, called the Atchison, Topeka and the Santa Fe. If you're into trains, you'd know all about the Atchison, Topeka. Yes. Went missing in 1939, presumed dead, born this day, 1897. And this is an interesting one, just one more. 2016, Margaret, or they used to call her Marnie, Nixon, American soprano, singer, film ghost voice. You know, we're talking about artificial intelligence being able to take the voice of a great singer or a great actor, and then you don't need the great singer or actor anymore. You've got the ability through technology to do exactly the same thing on a computer. Well, before all that happened, you had Marnie Nixon, because she was the ghost voice for Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady. She was singing the words that Natalie Wood was miming in West Side Story, Deborah Carr in The King and I. Anyway, nobody hardly ever knew her, but millions loved her voice. She dies at 86 on this day in 2016. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Peter Clayton will be back tomorrow. We'll talk some more about that educational revolution. And of course, thank you as always for your comments. I appreciate everything you say. Believe in yourself, and goodbye for now.
Well, for a start, it's very hard to define what it is because, in fact, the Prime Minister says it's a modest proposal that just recognises Aboriginals in the Constitution, for example. The people who have put it together say, no, it's a major proposal which will empower us in a way we haven't been before. The lawyers are having a picnic because some lawyers are saying this is sound law. Others are saying it will lead to endless activism. I'm simply reporting the facts there. That's very easily checked. There's no agreement on what it is or what impact it will have. I am opposed to it for three reasons. The first is the reasons I've just given. The denial of agency and what have you means, and I've had a lot of experience with it. I have had a lot of experience. And I've seen it on the ground. And Aboriginality is not a nation. There are in fact 300 to 400 nations. And they are, many of them, proudly individualistic. So I don't know how 54 people are going to represent 300 plus nations and have a special voice that no other Australian has. The second thing is that the debate has been highly emotionally charged and there have been the put-downs. If you're against this, you're a racist. Well, I'm against it because I don't think it's going to work. And for the third reason, I don't think constitutions, I think good constitutions, they only work in the culture. I mean, Russia had a great constitution. You would know that. But it wasn't a free country. They only work in the culture in which they're embedded.
That's right.
But our constitution was put together. I mean, we're one of the oldest democracies in the world, Australia. And we were able to draw on the absolute best internationally, particularly from the American Declaration of Independence and everything that came out of that process, and drawing on the British model as well. But it was late in the piece. And I am on record as saying, and I repeat here, that in my view, a constitution should be a dry, dusty document that draws no distinctions at all based on wealth, where you live, gender, position in society, or the colour of your skin. The very model of equality is to ensure that no one's singled out.